Okay, let's talk next about the harmonic things that we need to consider while we're working on a second species counterpoint. And what we really mean by the harmonic stuff is the vertical stuff. You know, the intersections of notes on a vertical level, which, when we're working in counterpoint, means parallel octaves, parallel fifths, and those things that we avoid like the plague. Which is a funny thing to say about aspects of counterpoint, because when counterpoint was first being developed, this style of counterpoint was first being developed, the plague was probably actually a very real consideration. Um, well, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not a history guy. Okay. Anyway, let's talk about avoiding parallels. Now, when you're doing something like this, so we have a lot more notes now and a lot more opportunities to create parallel octaves and fifths. One thing you can do to save yourself trouble is try to avoid using similar motion. When you use similar motion, you're in danger of creating a parallel, right? If you're on a fifth and then you do similar motion to another fifth, you've created a parallel fifth. If you use contrary motion, you're safer, but you're not invincible. Case in point, I've taken our counterpoint that we just made in the previous video, and I've changed a couple notes. So I've changed it a little bit so that it's got some problems. And I just want to go through and identify them. Okay, so let's label the intervals. Okay, so I start on an octave here, right? C to C, octave, great. Now what have I got here? G to G. Another octave, right? That's parallel octaves right there. 2 octaves in a row, no good. Even though they are technically using contrary motion, right? This one's going up, this one's going down. That's contrary motion, but it's also parallel octaves. So this is no good. This is a big error. So parallel octaves, no good. Let's keep going. Here we have a 2, G to A. We can call that a passing tone because I go to B here. It's totally okay. So E to B is a fifth. Okay, nothing wrong with that. Now I go E to G. That would be a third. Nothing wrong with that. But now I go A to E. Now I got a problem. Because this is a parallel fifth. Why is it a parallel fifth? Well, it's because our 2 consonants, this is called a beat-to-beat parallel, meaning the downbeats are parallel fifths. Even though this is a consonant skip, we still think of this as it's passing in some ways. So 2 downbeats of a perfect fifth in a row are considered parallels. So this would be considered a parallel fifth here. No good. Another error. Now I've got another error in this. See if you can spot it by the time I get to it. I'm going to keep labeling my stuff here. So I've got an A to an A. That's an octave. Oops. There we go. So fifth to an octave. That's 2 perfect intervals in a row. That's not against the rules, but it's dangerous. I have red flags going off here. The easiest way to fix this would be to change this note. Then you would avoid the parallel fifth and the dangerous thing that is happening here. But let's just keep going. So I have a G to B. That is a third. And I have a G to G. That is an octave. An awful lot of octaves. But these 2 are not parallel octaves. These are okay. It's a lot of octaves, so it's not great, but these two are okay because they're on the offbeat, the unaccented portion of the measure, and that can be allowed. So that is not a parallel octave in that case. Okay, now we have an F to an A. That'll be a third. An F to a B. Same thing as before, right? I didn't change that. So that's our tritone. We'll call it an augmented 4. Oops. Augmented fourth. That's how we label that. And that's okay by itself because it's passing. Step in and step out. That's all right. Now we have an E to a C. So we're going to call that a sixth. E to an E. Call that an octave because it is. And now I have a D and a D. What did I just make? Right there. From here is an octave, and here is an octave. So those are adjacent. That's it. And that is an adjacent parallel octave. So it's the two intervals right next to each other. That makes one. Also, the note to note makes them, and you skip that in between note, but that in between note does count. The second half of the beat does count when we are right next to two of the same interval. Parallel octaves, no good, right there. However, it gets worse. I think, if I did it right. Let's do one more here. B to D is a sixth. And then back to our octave. Do you see the last one? There's one more in here. It is here to here. So another parallel octave on a note to note, or a beat to beat, I'm sorry. So that is an octave that is parallel. So I've got like a double parallel octave here. I've got this one to this one, and then I also have this one to this one. So there's a bunch of stuff wrong with this, but that's what we have to watch out for. And those are the rules behind how parallel octaves and fifths work. Now, let me point out something here. Why don't we like parallel octaves and fifths? This is interesting to note. Perfect intervals have a really thin sound. Like they fit together just perfectly, which is why they're called perfect intervals. And they sound thin. So when you're writing a counterpoint, you always are hearing two notes, right? But when you hit those perfect intervals, it feels like everything thins out. And that can be okay. But if you do two in a row, then it really feels like things thinned out, and it just doesn't sound good. Now, to our ear, these kinds of intervals, these kinds of perfect fifths and octaves that like have a note in between are a little harder to hear. But, you know, back when this was much more common, people were more sensitive to hearing these kinds of things. Let's hear what we got here and see if you can hear the parallel octaves and fifths. Pay special attention, I guess, to this first one and these last two. And just see what you think. See if you can hear the badness in it. I can hear it. I don't like the sound of it. I mean, it sounds like kind of like the rug gets pulled out from under you when you hit like this interval and this interval and this last one, but that's okay. But it just feels empty in many ways. And that's how counterpoint works. There's all these rules and you have to follow them. And parallel fifths and octaves are not good. Okay, let's do one more video on this topic. I want to do a rundown of the rules that we've learned in second species counterpoint so far.